In this lesson, we're going to create our weapon functionality for our game. Okay, so at this point, we want to go ahead and start creating some different game objects to hold our information and our behaviors for our weapons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create an empty game object. So to do that, we'll go to Game Object, Create Empty. Now it's going to bring in this game object, and we're just going to rename this, and I'm going to call it Weapons. Okay, and I'm actually going to go ahead and call this Weapons GO for Game Object. So that way I know which objects are going to be holding my script and which ones are actually just models. Okay, so with my Weapons game object named there, I'm going to go ahead and create another game object, and I'm going to call this one Assault Rifle game object. So we're going to do Game Object Create Empty, and we'll call this Assault Rifle GO. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do now is go ahead and import my machine gun or my assault rifle model here. Okay. So Justin has this ready for us, just an untextured version. So let's go ahead and go to our imported assets. We're going to go to Meshes, right-click, and import new asset. I'll go to my C drive and game assets. And here we have our machine gun or assault rifle. And I'm going to bring in machine gun done. So we'll import that. So now we can go ahead and bring this into our scene. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop this right in there. And I'm going to get this in just kind of a rough position of where it's going to be in our scene here whenever we start playing this game. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in some rough estimates here, just trying to get rid of all these decimals here. So I'm going to do 1.85. I think that's where I had it before. And in this one, we're going to go ahead and store this at, we'll go ahead and we'll keep this right where it's at here. So we'll do 0.75. Make sure we type that in correctly there. There we go. All right, so now I need to go ahead and position my weapons game object and my assault rifle game object. So I just want to make sure that they're in around the same place as my machine gun here. So again, on the X direction of my weapons game object, I'm going to type in 0.35. And on my Y, I'm going to type in 1.85. And then this one, I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at 0 for this one. And do the same thing for my assault rifle game object. So 0.35. Now you're probably wondering, why are we positioning these right now? Is this really that important? Well, I like to keep things nice and neat as I go along, because what happens in game development is you tend to actually forget about things. So if you go ahead and keep things clean as you go, you won't forget them later on, and you'll be wondering, why isn't this working properly? What's going on with this? And it could be just a pivot point of a game object is off. Okay? Alright, so now that I've got all of these objects created and positioned in the right positions, I need to go ahead and parent them together. Now the way I want to do this is I want to actually parent my assault rifle game object to my weapons game object. So my weapons game object is going to be basically the main parent that holds all of the information for all of my weapons that I'm going to create here. So my assault rifle is going to go here. My assault rifle game object is going to hold all of my script information, but then it's also going to hold my actual machine gun mesh. So I'm going to actually take this and drag it down right on top of assault rifle GO. Okay, so that's parented there. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually parent the weapons game object to my player. Because if I go ahead and hit play right now and I move, you'll notice that the weapon stays behind. Okay, it's not actually parented. So if I go ahead and hit play, let's go ahead and go to our weapons, and I'm going to expand my player relative controls and just drag this right on top of player. So now if I go ahead and play this, if I move left and right, my machine gun comes along with me. Okay. Now, this is just for right now. This is just to get some functionality. This may change later on down the road. We may need something different. We're probably actually going to need this game object parented to a node on our player object once it's animated. Okay, so this is just temporary to get this functionality. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and start getting some behavior out of our assault rifle. We need to get this thing to shoot here. Now, in order to do this, I want to go ahead and set up an environment that's a little bit bigger than this. So I'm going to select my plane, and I'm going to take the scale on the X and Z up to 5. And then I'm going to actually go ahead and create a box, just kind of like a wall here. So I'm going to go to Game Object, Create Other, and Cube. So I'm just going to bring this over here. Let me go ahead and make sure this is at 0 and that my Z is at 0 as well. And let's bring this to 0 just for right now, just to make sure that everything is nice and lined up. You can never really be too careful whenever setting this type of stuff up. Okay, so let's take our size on this guy here. Let's go ahead and, that's our trigger, I'm sorry. Let's change our scale on this. So let's scale this out, and we'll just go ahead and go to 50, and we'll take our Y, we'll take this up to 5, well, let's go to 10, just to make this a tall wall, so that way we can actually shoot it and interact with it. Okay, so now once that's there, let's go ahead and hit play, just make sure that it stays there, and now we've got something to shoot up against. Okay. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and actually create our JavaScript custom script for this weapon here. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a folder. Remember to organize as you go. So I'm creating a folder here, and I'm going to call this custom scripts. Okay. Now inside of my custom scripts folder, I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to create JavaScript. And I'm actually going to go ahead and call this player weapons. Okay, and this is just going to hold some functionality that's pretty much across the board for all of my weapons. So things like weapon swapping and actually detecting whether the weapon is firing or not. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and double click on the player weapons script here. And this is going to bring up our mono-develop, and you'll see that player weapons is active. And it's got a little bit of code in here already. And what I'm going to do is actually just select it and hit backspace to delete it out. The way that we're going to do this is I'm actually going to go ahead and just paste in the code that we've already built for this, and then discuss with you what each block of code does, what we're checking for in this. So this is actually going to save some time with, instead of sitting here typing, it's going to actually save time and help you understand better. Because I'm not the best typist in the world, and a lot of times I end up making a lot of mistakes, and all you hear is keyboard chatter a lot of the time. Okay, so right now you're probably a little bit overwhelmed with all of this code that we've brought in, and really this isn't a whole lot of code. This is only 39 lines of code. We have scripts that are way longer than this for this game, and what I want to do is just kind of break down the blocks of code so that way you kind of get an understanding of what it does. You may not fully understand at this point. You may be really new with JavaScript, but just stick with us and just kind of follow along, and you'll kind of get an idea. So the first thing that I want to do is I always comment my stuff here. So I'm just saying this script is going to provide base functionality for any weapon that we create. So the first block that we have, or this first function that we have, is called awake. And this is a Unity function, okay? A Unity script function. And awake is basically, it's going to do this action whenever the program wakes up. It's going to be the first thing that it does, okay? So it's going to say select the first weapon in our list that we have. Okay, so weapon, select weapon 0. Now it's not necessarily sure what weapon 0 is until it gets down here to the actual select weapon function. Okay. Now I know I'm skipping ahead just a little bit, so let's go ahead and go to the next function. So we have function update. Now update is another Unity script function that happens automatically, and update will go ahead and update your game every single frame. So it's checking for something every single frame. So in this case, it's actually checking if input .get button, so any button that we press, if it has the tag of fire 1, it's going to go ahead and broadcast the message fire, and it's going to go ahead and fire that code. Okay? Or actually execute the fire code that we've created, or the fire function. Okay? Now we don't actually have a fire function just yet. We'll set that up. Okay? So the next thing that it's going to check is if input.get key down. So if a keyboard button is being pressed down, and if it's the 1 key on your keyboard, it's going to go ahead and select weapon 0, okay, in our list. Now, if that's not going to happen, if that hasn't happened yet in our update function, okay, it's going to go ahead and say, all right, else if number 2 key on our keyboard is being pressed, let's go ahead and select weapon 1. Okay. Now, if none of those are happening, it's just going to go ahead and keep going through this update and just checking for any one of these statements to go ahead and be true. Okay. Now we have our next function, and this is actually handling our weapon selection, and this is just some basic functionality here. Now, the function select weapon, it's creating an index or a list of weapons that we have inside of our Unity project, inside of our hierarchy. Now, right now, we only have an assault rifle game object, so our list is only going to be one item in that list. So it's saying, right off the bat, it's saying if our list or our index is 0, and the index is less than our transform.child count. So in that case, what's in our list? Do we have an assault rifle? Do we have a shotgun? Do we have an Uzi? Do we have a bazooka, a rocket launcher, whatever? It's going to go ahead and check for that. And if the list is not built up to the amount of children that we have in that list, okay, or the amount of weapons, it's going to go ahead and build that list. So if I have 5 weapons in my list, or in my hierarchy, it's going to go ahead and count up until it reaches 5. Okay? Now, it's going to go ahead and activate the selected weapon in this case. So if I press 1 on my keyboard, it's going to go ahead and get that weapon and then set it to true. It's going to make it visible. And else, what it's going to do is go ahead and deactivate any weapon in that list. So if I've got 3 weapons in my list, I've got an assault rifle, I've got a shotgun, and I've got a pistol. Okay? If I press the 1 key and that selects my assault rifle, it's going to go ahead and activate that assault rifle and then deactivate my shotgun and my pistol. Okay? All right, so here's our player weapons. And basically what we've got here is just some firing functionality, and then we've got some select weapon functionality. Now, what we're going to do in our next lesson is we're going to go ahead and create the JavaScript object for our assault rifle to actually get this thing to fire, because right now this is pretty much worthless. So let's go ahead and do that in our next lesson.